The Archives. Welcome to the Archives. Bendy in the Dark Revival is filled with numerous characters that each had a critical role to play in the progression of the game. Here in the Archives, you will learn a little bit more about them in an up-close and personal way. Feel free to explore. Wilson cartoon. Wilson was a difficult character to balance. At first, the players are purposely led to believe he is a one-note character, obviously evil with an over-the-top villain personality. But as the story progresses, we see other sides of the character, and the player becomes muddled with who this man really is. In one draft, Wilson was written as a servant of Nathan Arch Jr., as a separate character at the time, but the story made far more sense when the two characters became one, eliminating a lot of needless narrative complexity. Audrey cartoon. Audrey is a kind-hearted rogue with courage, determination, some flaws, and a deep, dark past. To make our story work, we needed a newcomer to the cartoon studio world, and Audrey was the perfect fresh eyes to help experience the adventure. From day one of production, we knew that if people didn't connect with Audrey by the end of the game itself wouldn't be successful. Fortunately, she turned out to be quite memorable indeed and stands out from the other members of the cast. The Ink Demon. As the world of the Dark Revival became more complex and established, we realized the Ink Demon's design needed a complete rethink to match our new tone. Previous versions of his appearance looked absolutely silly when placed in the world alongside other characters. No amount of creepy music or screen effects could conceal how out of place he looked. The Ink Demon needed to look different than anything else in the world and show a natural progression of the Ink Demon's evolution as Wilson held the cycle in place. Bendy, the iconic imp, was redesigned for Dark Revival to stand out a bit from his traditional cartoon appearance by giving him a suit of clothes. He posed some minor challenges, specifically a face that sported the classic Bendy eerie smile, but still managed to be heartwarming in the right conditions. He is a fan favorite, so his design had to be just right. During production, we originally envisioned Bendy to talk, with a series of cute squeaks to contrast the dark, low voice of the Ink Demon, but this turned out to be very distracting, and the idea was scrapped pretty early on. The Ink Machine, designed by Thomas Connor of the Gent Corporation, stolen by Joey Drew, retrieved by Archgate, and once again reclaimed by Gent. The Ink Machine's next adventure is a mystery. Beast Bendy. Returning for the climax of the Dark Revival, Beast Bendy also was revisited with the mindset of making him more powerful and beast-like. Traditionally, in most horror games, they tend to build to a point where the main villain becomes a final form monster. As a final boss, it's practically a trope. Our idea: what if you got to play as that final form instead?
Joey Drew memory. The man, the legend, the memory. Creating this version of Joey Drew was both an exciting and daunting process. It was clear from the start this Joey would be different from the one from the original Bendy and the Ink Machine game. This was a man with all the guilt from a past life, but without the experience to fully understand it. The real Joey Drew made many mistakes, but ultimately learned from them. This doesn't absolve him of his sins, but at the end of his life, he was able to help correct some of them and help fight the darkness he created. Betty, a faithful maid, among other things, to Wilson. Betty was an important character to the story of Dark Revival. As a failed experiment and someone relatively new to the cartoon studio, she was able to give a somewhat different point of view on the state of the world. We have purposely left it unclear if Betty was in on Wilson's plot to harvest Audrey, or if she is just a bystander. Behind her mask, there are still answers to be found. Nathan Arch Sr. Nathan Arch was everything Joey Drew wasn't. He worked hard, built up from nothing, and never compromised his integrity. Joey had big dreams, but Nathan accomplished his own dreams. He and his wife Tessa raised a son with as much love and care as they could despite Nathan's career pressures. Sadly, his son did not share Nathan's natural talent for business and enterprise. Audrey's donut. No, you can't have it, Audrey. Wilson. Haunted by the impossible shadow of Nathan Arch, Wilson sought to achieve something that would make his father proud. By luck, he stumbled upon the Ink Machine and was able to become the world's new master. Holding the cycle in place, he continued his experiments. Experiments that could not fully be realized until the Ink Demon was purged. However, unnaturally entering to and from the Ink realm has taken a toll on Wilson's physical being, slowly robbing him of his health. Audrey, the unknowing daughter of an animation pioneer, Audrey has blocked out the memory of her past after losing her father. But his role in her life was not over. A talented animator and artist, her skills landed her a job at Archgate. Was it fate that led her to reunite with Joey Drew's machine, the machine of her birth, or was it planned? Henry Stein, the original cycle breaker. Henry Stein is the ghost of a man who lost his purpose years ago. Once fueled with finding a way to escape the torture of the ink demon and finally his way home to his wife, Henry is now left with the cold reality of being a recreation of the person he thought he was. Saved as a special surprise for the fans of the Bendy and the Ink Machine game, Henry was strictly omitted from all public discussion of the character during the entire production, which spanned several years. But Henry is returned with a satisfying face reveal. Allison. Returning for another victory over the Ink Demon, Alice is always the voice of reason, a beacon of hope. Allison's design was carefully upgraded from the Bendy and the Ink Machine game to maintain her personality, but with more fidelity. The purpose of meeting Alice so early in the campaign was to introduce the player to a familiar face after the main introduction. At the start, Allison was able to serve as the motivating force for Audrey until the main plot kicked in later. Tom is Allison's silent protector, and the only Boris clone involved in the main story. Where is Boris the wolf? Rumor has it that during the events of the game, Boris is experiencing a dark survival of his own. Heidi. It is believed that Heidi has spent some time in the pit, a prison set up by Wilson and the Keepers. It is unclear why, but mostly likely she was able to access places she shouldn't have. The experience in the pit changed her, as it does many, reverting her into a childlike state, longing for happiness again. Porter. As the cycle was held in place, and with the influence of the Ink Demon held at bay, the cartoon world was able to grow and advance, creating such characters as Porter, a lost one who came to claim an identity as an explorer. Porter was written with the knowledge that Dark Revival would feature a far more serious tone than the first game of Bendy and the Ink Machine, as his light-hearted innocence would help the player feel warmth in this inky world of sorrow. Sammy Lawrence. The famous music composer of the studio, Sammy Lawrence originally had a slightly larger role to play in the story of the Dark Revival, but in a story already filled with so many characters, making them all play a meaningful part became a challenge. He was ultimately sidelined in favor of telling a more coherent storyline. Although it is interesting to note that Sammy Lawrence appears to have mastered the flow ability in Bendy and the Ink Machine long before Porter and Audrey could wield it. Lord Amok. Ruler of a sewer cult, Lord Amok illustrates how the world of the ink had continued to develop into different societies deep within the darkest places. Though he was weak in fight, his name will live on forever. Alice Angel. The self-appointed queen of the studio, Alice Angel is one of the most memorable faces in the Bendy world. Forever lost in a tide of insanity, she is an absolute delight to write for as a character. An angel with many layers, time will only tell if this inky temptress will ever reappear. The Lurker. The Lurker, or Steve as he became to be known, was originally created as a brute-type enemy that would free roam the way the Lost Ones do, but ultimately felt unnecessary, and the random Ink Demon encounters already fueled the role of putting the player on edge while exploring previous traversed locations. In the end, the Lurker found a much better calling as an unlikely ally, effectively expanding him into more than just a typical enemy. King Widow. Ink Widows have begun to infest where the light grows darkest. Their king, the biggest and most feared, will only emerge from his nest when its young are threatened. Shipahoy Dudley. The demented invention of Wilson. Created to serve the dual purpose of dethroning the Ink Demon in the cartoon world, and also upstaging Joey Drew in the eyes of Wilson's father, Nathan Arch. Neither of these happened. Shipahoy Dudley is a mysterious sailor with an eerie grin, similar to that of Bendy. Alongside his sidekick, Crackle the Crab, it is unknown what cartoon adventures they would have together. The Keepers. Wilson's deadly guards and scientists. They aren't perfect, but the Keepers will get the job done, no matter the cost. They are responsible for pressing the Ink Demon in a smaller form, keeping his power sealed away, until Audrey came along and unknowingly changed the situation. The Keepers were visually designed to reflect the dangers and evils of the Ink Machine itself, faceless beings made of gears and wires, with no sense of morality, ordered around like cattle, a creation living without purpose. The Butcher Gang. Barley, Charlie, and Edgar, the three original members of the Butcher Gang, formed from the Ink Machine, deconstructed by Alice Angel for body parts, and bond together to survive with sneak attacks on their prey. In Dark Revival, we meet an artificial fourth member of the gang, Carly, the Ghost Girl. Although when you begin to examine her closely, Carly only seems to be a shell with perhaps someone inside.